Hello, Gold Derbyites. Welcome back to another edition of Awards Magnet. I'm Deputy Editor Ethan Alter, and this week we're featuring my conversation with the one and only Nathan Lane. The stage and screen star is currently back on Broadway in an acclaimed production of Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman, playing one of the great roles in American theater, Willy Loman. This new version is directed by Joe Mantello and co-stars Laurie Metcalf, Christopher Abbott, and Ben Allers, and it was recently nominated for 9 Tony Awards, the most for any non-musical play during the 2025 through 2026 Broadway season. Lane himself is nominated for Best Actor in a Play. This is his 7th Tony nomination overall, and he's won 3 previous Tonys for productions of A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, The Producers, and Angels in America. We talked about the challenges that come with taking on this particular play and discussed the 30th anniversary of his breakout film role in The Birdcage, as well as the 25th anniversary of The Producers. Listen in and be sure to catch Death of a Salesman during its limited Broadway run. All right, please welcome the one and only Nathan Lane to Awards Magnet, the star of Death of a Salesman and countless other productions, Tony nominated for playing Willy Loman. Congratulations, Mr. Lane, and welcome to the podcast today.
Thanks very much, Ethan. Nice to be here.
Willy Loman is often referred to as the American King Lear. Is that how you thought about it when you approached this part? Is it that kind of mountaintop role for you?
It was certainly something I've been thinking about for a long time and had been in the works for a long time. And so yeah, I mean, it was not something I thought about when I was younger, although it was Joe Mantello who really brought it up the very first time way back in 1995 when we were doing. It was the first time we worked together, and we were doing the Terrence McNally play Love, Valor, Compassion. And for some reason, at one point during a rehearsal, he quietly turned to me and said, "Someday I'm going to direct you in Death of a Salesman." And he says himself, he doesn't know where that came from. He wasn't even working full time as a director yet. He wasn't. It was maybe a premonition of some kind, but I always remembered it, and we would reference it from time to time. And then as I was getting older, he started to talk more seriously about it, and so that could be a documentary in itself, the history of how this production happened and all of the ups and downs, the roller coaster ride it's been. But things happen when they're supposed to happen, and I certainly have felt this with this production. So I'm just grateful, very, very happy that it actually did happen, and I'm very proud of everyone involved.
Do you still, having done this now, do you still have a Lear on your brain? Is Lear something you want to do one day as well, something to aim for?
No, I nothing against King Lear. He's he's a swell guy, but no, it's Lear is not a part I've coveted or thought about. Um, no, this will do.
Right. Like,
I
I've done
think,
this. That's great.
this part is actually longer than King Lear, and so I feel like I've covered the I've covered the difficult father ground now,
Right.
um, for sure. It is one of those parts that if you're an actor and you're looking for a challenge, well, here it is, just staring you in the face, and is has been doing it for 77 years. It's astonishing to me. This whole thing is astonishing that they're selling standing room at the Winter Garden for Death of a Salesman. Now, if you had told me that several months ago, I wouldn't have believed it. But so much of that has to do with Joe Mantello and his vision of this, and his work, his research into the archives, and so much of this has been inspired by a lot of what Miller was thinking about when he first wrote it, and it was sort of before Ilya Kazan and the designer Joe Malziner
Mm.
got a hold of it and said, and Malziner said, I think it's all set in and around this house. And Joe was always trying to find, we know what that is like. That sort of became the template for the play, that and the Alex North music. And how do we find another way in? What would it be like if Arthur Miller, young Arthur Miller, came to me and said, I've written this play. How do you think it should be done? And he and Chloe Lamford, our set designer, talked and talked and talked for months and months, and finally felt, gee, they talk an awful lot about that car. And okay, so the car, that becomes the central image. It's how he makes his living, and it's how he takes his life. So that made a lot of sense. And then where would this car be? And then they came up with this as Robbie Bates said to me, this warehouse where the American dream went to die. Um, and it gives it a kind of haunted quality. It's like a nightmare. Some people have said it's his life passing before his eyes just before he dies. Many people see many different things, which I love, that people are, seeing different things as it affects each individual. I just think Joe was so smart about this, and when he had already been thinking about casting younger actors as young Biff, young Happy, and young Bernard. So in those scenes in the past. And then when he looked at this earlier draft, in the cast list, it said Biff, Happy, Bernard, young Biff, young Happy, young Bernard. So Miller had thought of it as well. And for whatever reasons, whether they were financial or artistic, who knows, but they didn't do it. So to me, it's very exciting that we're doing that for the very first time. And I think that really adds a lot to also the notion that when he steps into the past, and not, people always refer to those as flashbacks, but Miller referred to them as concurrences because he's living in the past and the present at the same time. So it's a very sort of idealized past. And I just think I find it works very effectively and gives people a chance to look at what Biff and Happy were in their youth, at least through Willy's eyes, and then what they became as adults. And I think that's really adds to the texture of the characters in the play. So many things like that, and also introducing this new score that Caroline Shaw has written, which I think it's so inspiring, and it certainly inspires me. I just think she did such a beautiful job. So all of those elements coming together, Jack Knowles' lighting and Rudy Matz's costumes, which, as the play is set in Willy's mind in the past and the present, so the production is. So you see people with clothes that could be period or not. Or then you see my boss Howard come in and he's dressed like someone from today, as like a tech bro with a Starbucks cup, which which I love. I love that. So it keeps you off balance, just as Willy is off balance. It keeps the audience off balance, and I think for some reason, taking it out of the domesticity of a skeletal house opens the play up in a way and frees it in a way, and it becomes like Greek tragedy. Because it's such the set is so enormous. So it's astonishing to me how the amount of work he put in, but all really stemming from what he was finding in Miller's writings and archives, and I'd love to think that Miller would have approved of all of this.
Yeah, the staging is so evocative. It's interesting because, as you mentioned, there are some tangible objects on stage, like the car, like tables and things like that. But there's a lot of intangibility as well. I know with
Mm.
actors, it's nice to have objects firmly in hand, something you can hold on to. So, how does that shape your performance when you don't necessarily have those things to refer to? How does that influence the way you approach the part?
Well, again, there was Miller who really, well, I mean, initially he thought it was going to be called The Inside of His Head and it would all be played inside a giant cranium. And then he quickly abandoned that idea. But he really did see it as more abstract and psychological, that it would just be some platforms and there wouldn't be anything, perhaps a table and chairs. But it doesn't, so much of the play is just we're all downstage of that car and it's all played in one specific area. And it hasn't bothered me. I mean, the lighting is, initially it's disorienting. I can say that. It's quite disorienting. I mean, it's stunning to look at. And it's really evocative. But on stage, sometimes you would turn and look at someone and you couldn't see them because there was this glaring light in your eyes, which is interesting for Willie because he's very often disoriented. That didn't bother me. It does do something when it's not strictly 1949. It changes the play. And I think Joe was searching for this new way in. How do we do this in 2026 after having seen so many productions, in particular Mike Nichols, which was really a recreation of the original design. It was the exact same set and Alex North music, and so how does this speak to us today? It seems to have worked because the one consistent thing that everyone says when they come back is, I feel like I've never seen this play before, which is, or I've seen many Salesmen, but this was the best. This was the most moving. It's also the undeniable power of this masterpiece that keeps teaching us about who we are as humans and as a country.
One thing that jumped out to me this time that I don't think I'd quite seen in the show before is the relationship between Willie and Happy, and Hap played by Ben Allers in the show. Usually that character is, he's the second son, so less attention is shined on him. But what I really felt this time watching the two of you relate is because he's sort of the less thought of in Willie's mind, he's the one who becomes most like Willie. And I think that like he's the one who's going to really be the inheritor of that legacy, as dubious as it is. I thought that was a really interesting note to play that I don't think anyone had quite teased out before.
Yeah, he's so desperate. You see him as a kid, and I don't pay any attention to him. I barely include him. I tell him, he's jumping rope is also good for losing weight. That's about it.
Right.
It's shameful, but his whole focus is on Biff, the golden boy, and you see why it leads Happy to become this womanizing um, a guy who wants to make it in business and be come out on top and like his dad. It's interesting that the very end, that the one who breaks down crying is Happy. Linda can't cry. Biff has, finally, he's the only one in this house of delusional people in this family who says, we haven't told the truth for 10 minutes and I'm going to tell you the truth. And what that does. I mean, you see it in the scene when Happy comes up with the crazy notion of, we're going to start a business together, the Loman brothers, and play exhibitions of water polo. I'd always say, did he say water polo? Anyway, and they all get caught up in it. Yeah, maybe that's a way out. and and then one thing happens and it all shatters. It's heartbreaking. because they all love each other. That was the thing. If you go back and look at Kazan's notes on the play, the one thing he keeps stressing is this is a play about love. These people are struggling with one another and with a father that's having a breakdown, and but it has to be all out of love, as Willie, does all of this out of love for his family, his children, and his wife, and trying to be successful. It's just that he has such a misguided view of the American dream. It's all based on his own self-worth, and idea of success is based on the opinion of others, being well liked, which, if you go on Facebook, that's all people are looking for. They're all looking for likes. Just click on the thing and say that you liked me. So that's easy to relate to these days, and certainly if you're an actor, the opinion of others affects your life and career. So it's tragic in that way that he doesn't see that, and that he thinks he doesn't understand why. He feels he's doing everything he's supposed to do, and he's done it and worked his ass off, and it's still not working, and it's not working for his kids. And he keeps going over it in his head. Where did I go wrong? And when reality becomes too much to bear, that's when he steps into the past. And but even then, even when he's in the past, reality starts to seep in. She starts talking about the bills, and and then that becomes too much, and he has to go back to the present. It was groundbreaking what he did, playing with psychic time in real time in this way. It's when you're young, and I had seen it as a kid on television when I was 10 years old with Lee J. Cobb and Mildred Dunnock. And even then I was affected by it. But then you read it in high school, but you can read it 1,000 times, and then you don't know you can't even begin to understand it until you're standing there doing it. And you go, oh, this has a complexity and nuance that, you didn't even begin to fathom just reading it. It's extraordinary. And the effect it has on you. You can do all this preparation and so forth, but where the play takes you, it's the only people who would understand are other people who have played Willie. It takes you to very, very dark places, and it takes you, and it's that one of those plays that it demands everything. It demands you have to leave it all on the stage. You can't hide in this play, and that's also the reason for me anyway. I want to do it. Is why else am I doing this unless I climb a mountain like this and test myself? That's what separates the men from the boys. It's that kind of play, and I that's the thrill of it. That's the excitement. And I love the play so much. So the fact that it's become this success is, I can't get over it. But I'm so grateful, and and so much of it is about it is about Joe and this company of actors. I couldn't do this play without Laurie and Ben and Chris. It's just we really have become a family. And every night we gather in my dressing room before the show and just talk and laugh. And there's a lot of laughter before we go out and live through this sad 24 hours in Willie's life.
Yeah, I would hope so. Yeah, you need a little laughter before you get go.
Well, look, there's a lot of laughter in the play itself.
Yes, that's true.
Miller wrote about the humor in the play and said how important he thought it was to the play, that people forget there's humor in it very deliberately because the ending is so tragic. But he meant for Willie to be foolish, as he said. He's, all of his contradictions and frailties and insecurities, when he wrote it, he said he would be laughing at the things he was saying. It is important, and it draws people in, and I mean, so many people said to me, like Meryl Streep, so it was like, just said, that was my father, telling my mother not to talk, telling her to be quiet while he was talking. She said, that was my father.
Well, certainly one of the famous members of the Willy Loman Club is Brian Dennehy, and you worked together on the Iceman Cometh, a terrific production of that. At that time, as you were thinking about this Willy Loman, did you seek his advice? Did you ask him what was it like?
Oh, he was always encouraging me to do the play. He wanted me to do it. And he was I mean, we knew each other over 30 years, and so the Iceman was such a wonderful, life-changing experience for me, and he was a real mentor through all of that, and a champion of my doing Salesman. I'd seen him do it, and was, just so incredibly moved by his performance, and I can remember sitting and having a dinner with him in L.A. at the Palm, and him saying he had just turned 60, and he said he was going to Chicago to do Death of a Salesman. I said, "Oh, that's fantastic. It would be great to see you." I think because the last one had been Dustin,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought, yeah, it'll be interesting to see, because he was such a mountain of a man, Dennehy, and to see somebody like that crumble, and he, I thought that will be devastating, and which it was, and so yeah, we did talk about it, and he would always say, I really want to see you do it. So I hope somewhere Brian is smiling.
To your point, he was this like just burly mountain of a man. So that's one take. What I really like about your take, and what I really see in it is this pleading for attention, where someone like Dennehy occupies such a space. It feels like your Loman is begging almost, that there's always that pleading note in your voice. Please notice me. Please, pay attention to me. That's definitely something I felt in your portrayal.
Well, I think he's always selling. I think he always thinks he's going to win, which is really what makes it sad. I think he thinks he's going to win. He thinks he's going to walk in and it's a slam dunk with this guy, Howard, who he doesn't really like. He was friends with his father. Although you'd never know, because Willie is such an unreliable narrator. He claims that, Frank Wagner basically was offering him a partnership in this firm. But we don't really know that. But he keeps saying he put his arm on my shoulder and said, you never hear what he said. But I think that's what makes him interesting. I think he's fighting for his life in every scene, and selling. He's selling. He's always selling, and he always thinks that it's going to work out, and then it doesn't, and yet he still keeps thinking. So when he's fired, he's still holding on to Biff and his meeting with Bill Oliver. So that dinner is incredibly important. That's what he's living for, the dinner, and they're going to be okay. And Biff is going to be all right. And then that goes south, and then he realizes the one thing he can give him is the $20,000 from an insurance policy. And it's only when Biff is able to what he realizes, that Biff loves him, that he's free to go and do this last gesture to give him something, which in his mind is a relief. It's he's done. He's able to finally commit suicide. There's obviously been many attempts, but he hasn't either gone through with it or he's screwed it up, and so it frees him to do that, which is tragic, and yet in his mind it's again something he's doing out of love. In this day and age, there are all these guys, white guys of a certain age, who feel they were promised something.
Mm.
They're entitled to something and promised something, and they're being erased by all sorts of by AI, DEI, and you pick a letter in the alphabet, and they're being replaced by it, and so they're angry. And that's why some of them have found their way to Trump. But I often think, would Willie have voted for Trump? And I fear that he might have. Um, but he's desperate and he's angry, and he feels he also has an optimistic view, which is maybe the saddest thing of all. In the midst of all this, I'm gonna do this. This is gonna happen. It's all right. Okay, you can knock me down, but I get back up. And that's what drives the whole second act.
In a way, it doesn't quite bring the family back together, but it allows them to see themselves. Like his sacrifice does allow the family to recognize some of who they are. So there's something that by taking himself out of the picture that allows them to move forward. And in that way, it's a gift in a sense to his family.
At least Biff.
Yeah.
I think Biff is going to move forward, or at least he's going to be who he really is and do what he really wants to do, as opposed to something he thinks he's supposed to do because of his father's dreams. And I think Happy is just going to go down the same sad path as his father. And poor Linda, I hope maybe Biff will bring her out to a ranch and get her out of Brooklyn, get her out of that sad warehouse she's living in. I mean, that's what Miller had many different answers to, what is the play about over the years. But when he directed it in Beijing, he said it's a love story between a father and son, and in a crazy way between them and America, which I thought maybe was his best answer to that question.
Yeah, he wrote a terrific book about that, Salesman in China. Yeah, that's fantastic.
Wonderful memoir.
Yeah.
Well, that's the first word I read. He says that Lee J. Cobb lost his voice after 3 months, and he wanted a 2-week vacation. And they said, Lee, you can't take 2 weeks off. It's a hit. They replaced him early. He left the play early. It became too much. It was the first of many, the difficulty of playing Willy Loman 8 times a week. You started with Lee J. Cobb, who is only crazily 39. That's the thing about Lee J. Cobb. When you look at those black and white photos of him, he would never guess he was 39. So he was really young. Try 70. Try doing this at 70.
Right.
Lee.
Take that, Lee. Right.
Take that, Lee. I'm doing 8 a week, baby. Let me tell you. I've certainly built up my stamina doing this.
Right. Absolutely. There are 2 notable anniversaries on your extensive stage and screen careers here. I'd be remiss not to mention. 30 years ago, obviously, The Birdcage was your breakout film role, and there's just 2 scenes in that film in particular that always stick with me, and they're sort of the non-farcical moments that Elaine May and Mike Nichols did so well. But the first, obviously, is the bench scene with you and Robin, where you sign the
palimony.
Yeah, which in hindsight now, looking at it now, it's clear that is the sort of gay marriage scene. You're marrying each other in that moment. I don't think people recognize the significance of that, and now it's so clear. And I wondered if in the moment you realize, oh, we're saying something here. This is making this real for people.
It was Elaine's addition to that scene. I mean, it's very similar to the scene in the French film. Those are there are 2 scenes that were added for those films. For the original film, the French film, that scene, and the scene when he comes in dressed in a plain dark blue suit, and then just wants to help, and he's wearing pink socks. Those 2 scenes were added, and they are the ones that, and they're key to that story. In fact, what I read is that when they because it was, it was they were a comedy team.
Mhm.
Michel Serrault, the wonderful French actor who played Alban in that, and his partner Jean Poiret, they were a comedy team. They appeared on variety shows and at nightclubs. I find this fascinating. And friends of theirs had written a play for themselves, and he thought, I should write something for myself and Michel. And then he wrote Le Cage Fall, and it ran for like 8 years in Paris. And then it was, made into this. It was a French Italian production. So Ugo Tognazzi took over the Poiret role in the movie, but they added, I don't know, I forget whether exactly who wrote Francis Weber or somebody added these scenes, and apparently Michel Serrault was a little miffed about adding these. It had been this perfect French farce, and he thought, why are you adding these two scenes? And of course, they're the scenes that are so, I think, crucial to the humanity of these characters. They're so moving. Elaine added that element. He was always threatening, why, I want a palimony, because I think it must have been a thing at the time. Wasn't there a Lee Marvin and his ex-wife? There was a palimony agreement. Anyway, that, yeah, it certainly felt like that. It was sort of her version of gay marriage. And yeah, I find that's my favorite scene in the film.
Yeah, the suit scene was the other one that jumped out at me, and it's funny that it to me feels like your Superman moment. There's that great moment in the first Superman where Chris Reeve takes his glasses on and off, and you see the Clark Kent Superman transformation, and that's Albert's moment that way. We get to see how other people perceive him, and then he shows who he really is, and it's a beautiful moment. I'm very glad that Elaine kept both of those moments in, and of course I could watch Gene Hackman fall in love with you endlessly. That whole him falling in love with you is one of the funniest parts of that second half. For sure.
Yeah. Well, Gene, was there anybody better on screen? Just one of the great stars of film. Yeah, it was just an honor to work with him, and hilarious. Yeah, that whole thing.
I'm
Yeah,
more
the
on the version.
dancing. I danced with Gene Hackman while singing. I could have danced all night.
No one else can say that. That is exclusive to you and your career.
And then as we're leaving the room, I always remember that it was just an ad lib. As I was leaving, I said to him, I played Eliza in high school. and and he says in a kind of slightly sexual way, I bet you were wonderful. And there's something very um, um, there's something going on there. Anyway, yeah, he was. I just what a wonderful memory, getting to work with him.
I'm more in the version of Some Like It Hot. We could have gotten with you in Jack Lemmon and him as Joey Brown. I think that would have been okay. I would love to hear his reading of Nobody's Perfect, but
Oh, it's
uh,
it's tough to top Joey Brown. It's always funny that Billy Wilder always says they were just thinking that was just a placeholder
mhm.
for we'll find a better joke, and then they couldn't.
The other anniversary, obviously, 25 years ago was the producers that took Broadway by storm. And I think people don't remember necessarily, especially younger theater goers, just how big that musical was and how much it revived Broadway at the time. And I wonder what was when you think back on the experience now, what was it like being at the center of that maelstrom? Because it was you and Matthew were everywhere during that time.
It was overwhelming at times. Just doing a musical 8 times a week
Right.
that's hard enough. But it was, yeah, it did become a phenomenon. Where people were talking about it on talk shows, getting tickets, the difficulty of getting tickets, and yeah, it was kind of a zeitgeist hit. It, the audience seemed hungry for it. I think after all of the very serious musicals from England, Les Mis and all of those shows, and Phantom, and it was a return to a kind of old-fashioned musical comedy with a Mel Brooks satirical edge, but still his Valentine to Broadway musicals, and also you just it's a plot that really can't be beaten. That's the premise of we're going to put on the worst show in history and keep all the money and make sure it flops. It's such a great comic plot, and it's just that thing that happens sometimes, very rarely, but when everyone, we all seem to be on the same page, and it was all coming from the same brilliant mind of Mel Brooks, and I wish I could. I wish I could go back and enjoy it more. It was enjoyable, but it seemed like a lot of pressure.
Hmm.
Then you have to live up to the hype. People, say this is the greatest thing that's ever happened, and you're like, oh well, okay. But it's just Wednesday night on the second show on a 2-show day. I hope I can do it. But thankfully, we had this wonderful cast, and Matthew. That's really how Matthew and I became close friends, and we went through it together. That bonded us. It was a once in a lifetime thing, and I feel very lucky. I got to spend that time with Mel and Anne and all those folks, and Susan Stroman, and it was an incredible moment in the theater for me, and to play that part. I wonder if they'll ever do a revival in New York. I don't know. Everything has become so, everyone's terribly sensitive now. I don't know whether. I think the only way you can do it is just to do it and don't apologize for it. We're still laughing at the original film, and so I don't know. I haven't. Obviously I didn't see this new version in the West End, but I know it's been a big success.
Absolutely. No, I think the time is right for a new version for sure. And you
Yeah.
and Matthew can hand off the roles. You can just be like, all right, your
Yes,
turn. You do
that's
this
right.
8 nights a week now. Like, see what
Well,
it
if
does.
they could get, don't you think if they could get Jack Black, that's who I would
Ooh,
cast.
oh yes, yes, that's a great
Jack,
one. Yes.
Jack has, when I see him, hosting SNL, I mean, he's the most adorable, brilliantly funny guy. He's a wonderful actor, but he's so dynamic and and he can really sing. He has a
Right.
great voice, singing voice. So that's who I would go after to get Jack. If he doesn't have to. He, he's starring in several franchises. And he doesn't need to
Right.
do 8 shows a week, but if for a lark,
If you asked him, he'd probably do it.
if you
I could see
asked him
him.
really nice, maybe
Right, exactly.
he
That maybe.
he would be. That's the To be
Right.
honest with you, he's the only guy I can think of that I would go, oh, that's a reason to do it, to bring it back. Says to get to see Jack play that part
Right.
with that he has that same kind of Zero Mostel madness.
Well, last question. I'll let you get on with your. You have a show to prepare for tonight, obviously. But every actor sort of takes something away from each role they do. So for Salesman, what's something that you'll take away from this that will apply to whatever you do next? What's something you'll carry with you based on this experience?
Oh, I don't know, sciatica. What will I take away? What I'll take away from is that uh I'm living proof that dreams can still come true at age 70. That this was something worth waiting for, and um, playing this character, and challenging myself, and just the love of this family. It's interesting, we all talked about that aspect of the play, about that it's a play about love. Chris did something interesting psychologically with me. He started calling me Papa
Mm.
very, very early on in rehearsals. And then at the end of the day, he would say, saying goodbye, he would say, I love you, Papa. And that always made me cry because I'm at this age, I could be a little sentimental. And the fact that Laurie and I have known each other for 40 years, and Ben, when I saw the first season of The Gilded Age, I said, that kid is a star. they should start writing for him. And they did, and he became the breakout character, and now he's my son. It's been that's, aside from just the privilege of doing this play, mm-hmm. and the effect you see it has on people, and when you hear people weeping in the dark, mm-hmm. It all feels worth it. It's the love that I have. I mean, I have it for the entire company, but for my family in particular, I'm very moved by that, and that I'll always take that away from it.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Lane, for joining us today on Awards Magnet. Make sure everyone in New York go see Death of a Salesman. Attention must be paid to this production on Broadway now through August. And best of luck at the Tony Awards in June. Thank you so much again.
Thanks very much.
Thanks for listening to Awards Magnet, Gold Derby podcast. Like what you heard? Leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Awards Magnet is produced by Andrew Merrill. Our logo is designed by Chelsea Sakura. Please like and subscribe to stay on top of all the awards news, and email us at awardsmagnet@goldderby.com.